Let's talk architecture on our laptop. We have two tiers. We have our development server and we have an index.html page. So when we enter the command Quasar dev, a development server is launched inside memory. That server listens on port 8080, and then the request comes in to serve index.html. So the server provides index.html page to the client, and this happens only once. So once the index.html page is loaded, we manipulate the document object model using pure JavaScript. So now we have this single page application running in our browser, and it happens only once that this page actually gets loaded, and that's it. So then of course the question is, how do we get data? If we want to have data from a database, how do we get to that data? And for that we need to define an application server. So what we do now basically is we create a custom server, a server that we program, that then resides next to our development server, and we reach that server through an application programming interface, or API. So our single page app, the index.html page, makes API calls to our application server that runs down here, which we call our backend. And this server we will run on port 3000. The port number actually is something that you can pick. You're free to pick basically any number as long as they don't conflict with popular services that have fixed port addresses. Otherwise, you can pick any port number. So we will run our application server on port 3000 and then make API calls from our index.html page to serve data from our application server. And that's what we're going to do next. Before we build our application server, I want to make a change to our current directory structure. So we have our base directory here, and underneath our base directory is our Hello World directory. In this Hello World directory, we have our source folder here with our pages and our index page, my chart, view page. So this is all here. And so I want to make a slight change to all the structure. So I will rename the Hello World into client. Now in my next step, I will create a new directory underneath base. So first I close this here. So I will create a new folder under base. And I say, I call this Hello World. Oops, Hello World. Then this folder I move directly under base. Come on. All right. So now I move the client directory into Hello World. So now I have my client underneath Hello World. And so in Hello World, I create now another directory, and I call that directory server. So I move this empty directory underneath Hello World. So now I have a directory structure that has base, and inside of base I have my Hello World folder, and inside my Hello World folder I have two other folders. One is called client and the other is called server. In my client I have my entire project, my first app, our first Quasar app that we worked on, and the server directory is empty. There's nothing in here. So this is where we continue to work with. So let's start to build our server. I have here our Hello World directory, and underneath I have the client directory with our Quasar application. Underneath that I have an empty server directory. So let's bring up our VS Code. And again here we have our client with Quasar, and we have our server which is empty. I'll close down the Get Started window here, and next I open a terminal here in VS Code and cd into my server directory. in my server directory, now I have to initialize the directory by creating a package JSON file. A package JSON file is a configuration file that will hold all the information about all the modules that we'll need that will then be assembled into our final server application. So I say npm init-y, and this creates our package JSON file, which we have right here. So when I open this up, that's basically the current content. So now I want to install my Express. Express is the Node.js web server. So I say npm install Express, and this will be then added here as a dependency in my package JSON. So that's the first package that we need in order to run our server. All right, so underneath my server directory, now I create another directory, a subdirectory, which I call API. And within that directory, I create a file called API.js, which is a JavaScript file. And in this API.js file, I will create the JavaScript code to run our server. And it starts with a constant that I create, express require express. So I require this package from the node modules, and then I convert this into an app where I say constant app equals express. Then in the next step, I want to use this app with JSON, where I say express JSON. This means that all responses from the server will be delivered in JSON format. JSON format is very easy to read and to disassemble within JavaScript. So when we return something in JSON from our API into our front end, we pick it up as a JSON in JSON format. That's basically a JavaScript object. So it makes it really, really easy to work with it. So we don't have to do any conversions or anything. It's really, really simple. All right, so in order to get our application server started, I now need to make it listen on a port. So we say app listen, and I make it listen on port 3000. So I add here a callback function. And here in this callback function, I say console log server running on port 3000. All right, so that's all we have, all we need currently. So the next step, we want to run this, want to see whether this works. In order to make this all easy for us here, because every time I make a change to the file, I would need to restart the server, and I try to avoid that. So I want to create something that automatically restarts the server every time I make a change to any of the server file. For that, there's a tool that I install, and it's called nodemon. And so when I open up my package JSON here, you will see how it installs. So I say npm install nodemon -d as a dependency, as a development dependency, so that this tool does not get installed in production, but only in development. And it comes in here into my JSON file. So this is now here. And now I want to have a startup script, which allows me to start nodemon and make it watch the directory. So what I do here, I say dev in the script here, and say here npx nodemon API API.js, that's our script, and then we make it watch our API directory. So that's basically it. So basically what this does is every time I say npm run dev, this script will be executed. This line will be executed. And it says npx execute nodeman with this script in the API directory and watch any changes in that API directory. So, so once that is saved, then I can go into my directory here in my terminal and say npm run dev. And so it starts up, and you can see here this is our callback function server running on port 3000. That is exactly this message here. Okay, so our server is running. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create a router middleware. And the router middleware allows us to route incoming path from our incoming API calls from our client. So, and for that, we underneath the API directory, we create another directory which we call routes. And in routes, we create a file called index.js. We call this index.js so that we only need to reference later the directory, because as a default, if nothing is mentioned as a file name and only the directory is mentioned, it's assumed that the file that is supposed to be called is index.js. So in this index.js, we define our router, and we start out with express actually. Express equals require express, and we need that because we need to pull out from express our router. The router is part of express out of the express package, so we say constant here, constant API router equals equals express router, express router. So now we have that. And here we do a router get with a /, which is our home page basically, and then here we put our middleware, which is our request, response, and our next. That's basically says that this is a middleware, the next. So basically it's good as a pass through, and that is then handed into a callback function. And so here we give back a response with JSON, saying, putting in a JSON object here with text, and we call this here hello world. Okay, so we have configured our router here. So basically what we do is we pull the router functionality from the express package and then create a callback function for the path, for the home path / with the basically responding to that get call with this object here, with this JavaScript object. So when a GET request comes in from a client with a just / basically the home, then this comes in and responds to that request with this JavaScript object text hello world. Okay, so having defined this, we now need to bring this into our API.js. So we need to include this here. And so what we do here is we say const API router equals require, and here we say our directory routes. And as I said before, because I don't specify a JavaScript file here, it's assumed that the JavaScript file within routes, within that directory, is index.js. And so then we do need to do one more thing, and that is we need to bring this in here, up dash use, and here what we do is we create kind of like a prefix as a route, a prefix, route prefix, so that we can distinguish calls that are sent to our API rather than anywhere else. So every route that starts with /API, we know goes to this destination. And so here we add our API router, and we close this out. So now we have a bug here somewhere. So about the bug. So here I'm in my API.js. So I have this bug down here, and so what I forgot here in my index.js, my route index.js, is I need to export this. So I need to say module exports equals router, and this should now compile, and you see the server is running on port 3000, so there's no error message anymore. So let's see whether this whole thing works. So I go into my browser here and put in localhost 3000/API, and so when I pull this up, then I get my response. Here it is. This is my JSON object. Says hello world. So I can change this here. I can say hello Henning, and so this recompiles, but then it does not automatically updates the page. So I need to update the page in order to reflect that. So our web server is running, and we get information back from it. So in our next step, we will do this call that I'm doing manually here through the browser. We will do this through an API call from our index HTML page, so from our single page application, that we then bring in this information from the server back into that application, display it there.